were not made aware of that previously, Senator. But yes, you're in charge of when the committee starts.
Well, thank you. I can add that to my resume as well. So.
You can add that to your resume. That's exactly correct. Committee, the first thing on the agenda, you have received the minutes for January 14, 15, and 20. And so I trust you've had an opportunity to look at those. And if you have questions, we will take questions. But if not, I will look for a motion to approve the minutes for 14, 15, and 20. Senator Bowser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make a motion that we accept the minutes from 14, 15, and 20.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second to Senator Titus. Questions on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is a hearing on Senate Bill 317. We will begin with an overview of the legislation by our Senior Assistant Reviser, Tamara Lawrence. So is it Senior Lawrence or? No, go ahead.
Whatever you would like, Mr. Chairman. Thank you and good morning, committee. Senate Bill 317 would provide additional requirements for applications to and awards from the Water Technical Assistance Fund and the Water Projects Grant Fund. These funds were established in 2023 and are administered by the Kansas Water Office to provide assistance for and implementation of certain water projects. Grants from the Water Technical Assistance Fund are used for planning, engineering, managing, and other technical assistance necessary in developing plans for water infrastructure projects or processing grant and loan applications for those projects. The Water Projects Grant Fund provides full or partial grants to municipalities or special districts related to water for construction costs or for water-related infrastructure replacement, repair, or maintenance. So Senate Bill 317 provides those additional requirements for both funds. And those would include requiring applications related to distribution or supply of water to include a minimum 25-year water supply for a proposed water project, unless the application is for a new water source that would extend the current water supply beyond 25 years. Requiring that a municipality with more than 50,000 residents demonstrate a threat to public health or failure to complete a project disproportionately burdens a low-income population. Prohibiting grants for issues related to the impairment of water rights by another water right. It would also require establishing a scoring matrix based on certain criteria if applications exceed the amount of funds available or capacity to provide resources. I'm not going to go through each one of those criteria, but you can see them on pages 3 and 4 and pages 7 and 8 of the bill. It would also require applications to be submitted by September 15th. And the grants would be subject to revocation and repayment under certain circumstances. It would also require the Kansas Water Office to include reporting and repayment requirements within the terms of each awarded grant. For the Water Technical Assistance Fund, the bill would require that any application submitted would include a complete preliminary engineering report. It would also require that at least 50% of the annual amount transferred to the fund be awarded to municipalities with fewer than 8,000 residents. Currently, this is 2,000 residents. This requirement would not apply if there are not enough applicants to comply with the requirement. For the Water Projects Grant Fund, the bill would provide requirements for awards to special districts, such as GMDs and rural water districts. It would also include a legislative intent statement that this fund should prioritize partial grants combined with loan funding from other financial sources. And I will note that on page 4 of the bill, I don't know if you've noticed, there is a printer's error. There is a sub-paragraph that is underlined. That should not be. My office is aware of it. We think we have solved the problem, so if the bill is amended and reprinted again, that should not be there. But I did just want to point that out. And this bill would take effect upon publication in the Kansas Register, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
We'll take questions in just a moment. So it would take an amendment to remove, okay. I would hope it wouldn't take an amendment to remove the underlining, but okay. Questions?
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay, questions, Committee of our Reviser. Senator Bowser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for that. Can you talk a little bit about the prioritization of the grants and what that that formula might be?
Can you point to me where you're looking at in the bill?
Where did I just see it? Well, I'm on page 6, line 31, 32, starts to talk about prioritizing the award for partial grants combined with loan funding provided by the Department of Health and Environment. I'm just curious what that prioritization mechanism looks like and what criteria we use to prioritize those. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a legislative intent statement, and my understanding is that it is saying that the grants awarded would prioritize awards that have additional funding from other financial sources. And if you look on line 35, it says, in order to increase impact of available funding.
All right. Additional questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. Thing that catches my eye here that I wanted to ask about, it says require that any application submitted include a complete preliminary engineering report. When you take these small towns, I don't know what that report costs, but I know that's kind of been an issue in small communities. Just wonder if you'd comment on that at all, how that number was set and that part of it. I understand the importance of it, but
I would defer that to one of the conferees.
okay.
Okay. Well, question's been asked. Do we trust Senator
I
Fagg?
give him time to think about it. The other thing, Mr. Chairman, if I could, 50,000 residents and below. What was special about 50,000? Anybody doing an analysis of how many cities that? I'm wondering how that number got set. That's what I'm saying.
I don't know that that would be a question for our revisor, but.
No, but that's number 2. Yeah. Okay.
And number 3?
That's it
Oh, that's it.
for right now, Mr. Chairman.
Additional questions or any questions of the revisor? Seeing none, thank you. Committee, our first conferee is our very own Senator Kenny Titus as a proponent. Senator Titus, welcome to the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is an honor to be on this side of the podium once again. I don't know if I've been here since I worked for the Department of Agriculture, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and talk about some of the changes to this bill. And I'll give you a little background. When this bill started as House Bill 2302 in the House, I was on the House Water Committee. I worked with several members on the committee there to expand funding for the state water plan. And part of the goal of that expansion when we sat down and talked about that was we need to bring more stakeholders to the table. You know, we had limited funding. We'd worked on, water appropriation, conservation, things like that we had typically associated with that. But there are a lot of water supply and municipal issues that we were starting to recognize as a problem. And we thought, if we're going to expand this big pot of funding, we need to bring the municipalities and the water suppliers into that discussion because they provide a lot of the water that drives, besides health and safety, economic development. So we wanted a more holistic approach to how we use the water plan. And the way we decided to help push that money out was to create these specific grant programs. And we set up 2 funds. One is for technical assistance. So if you need your engineering plans, you need to develop an idea, feasibility, any of that, those are typically hundreds of thousands of dollars, not millions of dollars to do that. If you need a set of plans on the shelf to apply for a grant, right? We set that fund up so that the municipalities could do that. That had an emphasis on small towns, to Senator Fagg's point about making sure they could get their plans ready. And then we set up the bigger grant project fund. We always knew it was never going to be enough to cover all of the need, but the idea was to put some money out there and help with some of these big projects, especially high priority ones that were having trouble getting funding. As we put this together, there was a lot we didn't know, and we had the requirements, and we left some blanks in the criteria that would be applied because it's a lot for a legislative committee to lay out all of the grant programs, especially on something new when we didn't have any experience. So there was a requirement for administrative rules and regulations to be adopted. One of the key gaps was we have a number of special districts. We have our cities, and we understand where they kind of fit, but we have rural water districts, groundwater districts, watershed districts. There are these sewer districts, things like that also have needs, but you can't apply a strict population analysis to them, and they have different taxing bases and responsibilities. So we needed special criteria. We didn't want to wade into how you weigh their applications. And so that was one of the issues. The other issue is we kind of put some generic criteria of things that should be considered when you look at these applications, but they needed to be fleshed out and more specificity so we really knew what was being reviewed. We've had a couple years of awards go out. The ability to adopt the regulations was more than the Water Office was willing to take on, and so we had good criteria in the initial drafting, but it wasn't clear enough, it wasn't transparent enough, and there were just some obvious gaps. The other problem is that they did add criteria that they used in scoring applications that were not explicitly listed in the statute. And the statute clearly says if you have criteria, they need to be adopted in rule and regulation. So the intent was good, right? We helped a lot of communities with this, but we're also not following the statute and we're using criteria that haven't been legally adopted. So a couple of problems there. So that was really the emphasis for this, was to step forward and say we need clear criteria that's applicable to people so they know what they're applying for and they can see how these applications are judged. So I sat down with the three biggest stakeholders that are the recipients of these grants. So this summer I worked with the Kansas Rural Water District Association, Kansas Municipalities, Municipal Utilities, and the League of Kansas Municipalities. Everybody has had sort of we all sat down, we reviewed all the drafts, took comments from everybody. I think they'll bring some slight tweaks since this has evolved a little bit, but everybody had their input and everybody was pretty unanimous that we need to make these programs more consistent and more transparent. A couple of the things that I'll highlight before I get into if you have specific questions about the criteria. One of the things was we put some criteria in for population. And the technical assistance grant, we had prioritized that money should go to, we didn't say how or how much, but we should prioritize communities of 2,000 or less. And that was in response to a specific need I heard from the smallest towns that, like when the ARPA money came available, they couldn't apply because it was a huge percentage of their budget to get the engineering plans they needed to apply. And even if they did want to spend 20% of their city's budget, they may not have the plans done in time to apply because it came up suddenly. So that was a real need for small communities to get help with technical assistance. Something that was sort of unintended that came out when we were having a water task force hearing on this was that 2,000 and below cap was not intended to apply to the grant programs for the actual projects. We wanted that to be broader because I had not heard that same specific need. However, the Water Office unintentionally applied that same sort of approach to award the grant programs. And you'll see I've given you all the data on the awards so you can see the population size, the per capita awards, peruse that. That came from legislative research. But the average grant recipient of the project grants was only 556. And so there are a lot of small towns in that, say, 1,000 to 5,000 range that have very different circumstances that are not able to access this funding that are still in need. So part of what we did was to set up different population criteria and to make it broader so the intent's clearer. So the idea is we set a population criteria of half the money needs to be focused on communities of 8,000 or less. And I set the line at 8,000 because that's about, it's not exact, but it's pretty close where about the 50 largest cities in Kansas show up. So for all the other hundreds would be below that 8,000 mark. As far as the 50,000, Senator Fagg, if you have a particular concern about that being too large or small, it was in the original. That was just sort of the line we said. These are the biggest cities that are capable of issuing bonds and have the base to take on big projects themselves. And so that most of the language around the 50,000 is if you have a real emergency or, say it's a really, really impoverished area and there's some reason you couldn't access normal funding, we wanted that to be available, but we felt like for those cities to access this program, there did need to be a higher bar. To the preliminary engineering report, that change is a response, and I believe some of the conferees will suggest we tweak that language a little bit. But we had a complaint that some municipalities were applying for and requesting the full amount of engineering on projects that weren't really feasible to build. So they're awarded hundreds of thousands of dollars and they've got a great set of plans, but unless we give them all the money to build it, the projects weren't feasible. Or for some other reason that it just wasn't going to happen. And so all this, the intent of that language is going to be that you use the technical assistance fund to get a preliminary report that says, here's what this project will look like, it's feasible, and then the heavy lifting engineering work can be done as part of a project grant or your next process. But it's really just to make sure we're not spending too much technical assistance money before we really know a project is a good project. So another set of eyes on it. And the other thing I'll speak about to the criteria, really we need consistency. We will never have enough, unless Senator Peck gets off Ways and Means, we'll never have enough money to pay for all of our needs. I'm just kidding. But it's a huge number, and the Water Office has shared that, right? The amount of demand for this. So what we have to do is we have to maximize the dollars we spend. One of those ways is to say, hey, if you're willing to apply for this and bring 20% to the table, you should be rewarded for that, right? There are always going to be extreme circumstances, but the idea is we put together this matrix of criteria. So, one of these pieces is, hey, are you needing help to expand to bring in workforce housing for economic development in a town of 4,000 people? That's a huge project. Affordable housing is a big deal. We can feed into these projects through these infrastructure, and we can help local tax bases, but we need good criteria. Another one is, for example, you need to repair your water system. But if we look back at your history, have you failed to charge rates that allowed you to maintain it? Are you asking us to come in and bail out because you've spent the last 30 years neglecting your system, right? We can't use state dollars in those situations. We have to maximize the money we have. We have to make sure we're meeting the rest of the state's priorities with this program. And I think as you look through those criteria, you'll see that those are the sort of things we work through and selected. So with that, I know there's a lot in this bill, but we had hoped that this would all be an administrative regulation, but this is the way it's worked out. So I'm happy to answer any specifics about process or criteria or what kind of has gone into it. So,
Thank you, Senator Titus. Questions of Senator Titus? I guess we do have at least one senator. Senator Fabb.
When you publish the application matrix scores annually, would those applications be available to the public, the actual because you're going to see somebody score high, and I would think somebody wouldn't be able to look and say, why did they score so high?
yeah, I think the idea would be that it should all be posted online, and I would think the applications would be public documents. There wouldn't be anything preventing them if we needed to clarify that. But the intent would be for all that to be available for
Public information.
yeah, for other city, review it and see what made a good application or a bad application.
Also, Senator, as I look at the list, this is something I've really wrestled with. As you get ready to establish that scoring matrix, you look at a town that's got under 50 people and the per capita award's $10,000 and it's located 150 miles out in the middle of nowhere, and say, okay, what's this going to be like 25 years from now? When you go to church and it's all older people in there. And when you take care of their water needs, there's other needs that come with that too. So you hate to put money into something that the question is, where does that go in the future? And my heart says one thing, my head says the other. So I would hope that in that scoring matrix, that be considered somehow in the process, because we need to make sure we got limited money. And it's got to show the viability of this small community to the future. So just, you might comment on that.
I appreciate that, and that gets to the core. And I know the project you're looking at. It's kind of I didn't know anything about it till I saw it on the spreadsheet. But I have it's a little near and dear to me because my ancestors came from Rush County, and several are buried in the Bohemian National Cemetery outside Timpkin. So it's a very familiar place to me. And everything you said is true. The idea with the matrix, there's no one category in this. The idea of having the multiple categories is no one thing is going to make or break an application. But, if you're looking at a town like that, the economic development perspectives are probably going to score pretty low, right? There's going to be other human factors that will raise higher. And so the idea is by creating a holistic way of looking at it, we avoid a simple, oh, my heart says this, my head says that. But the intent behind putting these categories together was very much maybe a little more indirect than you just said it, but that was the intent behind the matrix, was to be able to better capture that long-term impact and value for the state.
Senator, had the 25 years of water supply, how was that set? What was that based on?
That was just used as sort of a standard term. We wanted to just make sure there was the right planning frame for the city, and we wanted to make sure the city had done its due diligence to make sure it had an adequate supply before we invest in a system that didn't have a long-term supply of water.
Thank you.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of want to go along with what Senator Fagg was saying. There are several communities that I know in my district that 500, 750 population, their infrastructure is 75 years old. And all of a sudden, how do we fix that? I mean, does this grant, they haven't been, as you said, maybe they haven't been charging their upkeep in their water rates. Maybe they haven't, but they don't have the money. They can't go and bond a big project. Does this take care of those people, or are we looking at a different program for them?
It's certainly part of, they're certainly part of the pool, and they fit in some of the prioritization categories. They'll score less well in other categories. To the extent this program was, the original thought when we drafted this was to do more than just that. I think it's been used primarily to do that the last couple of years, and I think our intent was broader. But that's really a policy question that we have to decide. Do we solely want to put state dollars into those situations, or do we want to do more because we can't do it all? And so that's kind of an evasive answer, but we have to decide if that's how we want to prioritize the money or not.
And I think I heard you say something that we're talking about when we want to expand housing. We want to make sure we can grow our communities. But once you have a program that is looking like this, that their water system is antiquated and is breaking, they have a hard time looking at growth if they can't fix what they got. And so there's a concern there. I think we need to look at helping those, but yet at the same time, we have our eye on the future for the growth and helping them do that. So no answers, just a lot of questions. Thank you.
Senator Reichman.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Senator Titus, for this presentation and the work you're doing on this water commission and so on. I want to make sure, I'm going to give you a real easy one. And when I look at the charts, and you could use any city you want, the water grant application, and I want you to go over the numbers for one to make sure I understand it. You could use Fowler if you want to, but I don't care. And I want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. So I just want you to go across there and explain how this chart's put together and what at each one of those lines, what they mean. Not.
Just to, yeah, so, you've got the awardee name, and then so population/customers, that's kind of, if it's a town, it's population, I believe. There are some like districts, sewer districts that got funding, so those would probably be customers and not total population. The grant type, LA is loan assistance, TAGF is technical assistance, and then the WPGF is water projects. And then we have the total costs, the total amount they were awarded, whatever that population or customer number was, that's the per capita number. And then if we have a description of what the project was for, that's the last column.
Thank you. That's what I thought it was. Thank you.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Senator, for a lot of work on this. And I do agree this is very helpful. Just a couple of questions. It was brought up about the intent of the legislature about you finding other funds. On page 6, those are identified as funding from the Department of Health and Environment or other financial sources. On page 8, when you're scoring, it talks about municipalities that can provide funding themselves. So are those for different programs or those?
So one is, there is a specific scoring matrix that allows for a higher score, the more funding you can bring to the table. The legislative intent, if you look through these, very few, we gave the Water Office authority to give partial awards in the original establishing language, but they did not do that very often. Most of the awards were full awards for projects. And so we just wanted to make it clear, rather than leave it up to the director at any given time to say, we thought it would be good to make it clear the legislature would like to see a lot more 80-20, 70-30 mixes, whatever's practical, rather than leave it up to their discretion in any given year.
Thank you. With that, it might be helpful to add municipal funds into that definition of the intent. And then here's a really in the weeds question. When you're talking about the Kansas Water Office, and this is on page 8, when the Kansas Water Office is sending notice, they can send it by an electronic mail message or by certified mail. This is lines 38 through 41. If they send it by certified mail, it's return receipt requested. So the office will know that they got it. If it's electronic, there is no similar request for return. And the reason that that might be helpful is if someone types in an error, they just do .com instead of .gov because they're so used to typing that. It would be good to have some way to ask for a return receipt on an electronic message.
I would suspect that they use an online application system, so I suspect they're giving consent, and it's all built into an automatic system, but we can certainly ask about that to make sure.
Thank you, I appreciate that, because it simply says electronic mail address included in the application. So they may apply from the clerk's office and use a different email address for a department.
Senator Bowser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for bringing this bill forward. I really like what I'm reading and hearing. I also understand the matrix criteria a lot better. I'm really glad to see that there's an emphasis on economic development. Really glad to hear that half the grants are going to go to cities with 8,000 or less population. Wonderful. I think I can make an assumption here, but I just want to hear you say it publicly. I would assume that this is aligned with the Water Task Force and the work that they're doing. Is that a fair assumption?
I don't know that we're not really delving into this level of, we haven't examined this program in particular at the regulation level at the task force, so I wouldn't be able to speak to them. We've talked about it in the sense we provide chunks of funding that go to these sort of projects, but we've kind of kept the task force out of diving into the specific weeds. And we did get a presentation, which I did reference, that we talked through the program and what it's used for, but as far as recommending specifics, but part of our charge is to tie water supply to economic development. And so in that general sense, and I think we'll see a bigger emphasis on that as we maybe rework some of the overall water plan priorities that we should be planning for. So I anticipate this will dovetail in with that.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One other question, and this is on page 9 when you're talking about grants being able to be revoked. So it says there is a lack of funding.
That would be if something was awarded and for some reason the state pulled the funding, if we had to pull the grant.
And so these are just done annually on September 15th. So if, and entities have 45 days to accept that. If you find that some entities are not able to accept those grants, they find that something has changed in their community, then there is a process that money can continue to be dispersed.
The original statutes have flow over for that fund. It would be available. And there'll be some proponent testimony that suggests some flexibility in that 45 days as well. So.
Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple quick questions. When you look at this water grant award data, there's quite a few on that front page. It says, most of them tell you what they're for, but there it says not submitted. I just wondered how come those weren't submitted. Do you have any idea?
Those are all, it's all the loan assistance programs that was, so it was helping pay off loans of projects that met certain criteria. It was it's analyst Drury that actually gathered this data for me, and this was what was provided. So I do not know why descriptions for those projects weren't included.
Follow-up question, scoring matrix, will that be made public ahead of time so that small cities can look at that?
Yeah, and it's in the bill, you know, the points available and the categories and all that, it's in the law, so it should be provided with the application.
Oh, okay.
Because you'll want to address each, when you apply, you'd want to address each criteria specifically.
Okay. So in that bill, how was that developed from the three groups that you talked to this summer? Did they kind of work on all that together, or how'd you come up with that?
I worked with them separately, kind of went back through and got feedback from each one on the drafts and the categories, and we kind of expanded some and retracted some and worked through it. We didn't all sit down in a room together, but
So this is your idea that's in here?
the original idea, yes, that
Okay. Have you passed that by anybody, you know, as far as the water office or somebody to double check that to say maybe they could add something to it or take something out, just a thought, so.
I've had some conversations with Health and Environment, DWR a little bit. They're not directly involved in this. I did not engage directly with the water offices. They had said they were not able to deal with the regulations, so I just went straight to the stakeholders.
Okay, final question. Is there any small cities that haul water by truck into their cities?
I know there have been examples in the past in Kansas in some certain situations. I do not know if anybody is currently hauling water, though.
Additional questions, committee? Seeing none, Senator, appreciate your suggestion. Oh, I do have one thing I want to mention. I really appreciate the words, "it is the intent of the legislature." If we put that in every bill, it would really make some of these court rulings null and void, because they would understand the intent of the legislature. So
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
appreciate that. Committee, our next conferee is Katie Miller, Director of Water Services, Kansas Municipal Utilities. Director Miller, welcome to the committee.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Peck, Vice Chair Alley, and Ranking Member Francisco, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony, and Kansas Municipal Utilities is an organization that stands in support of this bill. KMU is a membership organization. We represent publicly owned utilities across the state of Kansas. We're a not-for-profit organization, and we represent the largest municipalities in the state, all the way down to some of our smallest utilities with less than 100 customers. KMU stands in support of Senate Bill 317 with proposed amendments. KMU was originally and continues to be a frontline supporter of what was House Bill 2302. We appreciate being a stakeholder and all of the work that is done with the support of the legislature to continue funding infrastructure projects and technical assistance in so many necessary instances for communities across the state. KMU does propose amendments to Senate Bill 317. On page 2, line 26, and I won't read those proposed amendments, but the first proposed amendment provides for additional or alternative preliminary engineering requirements that aligns with the state SRF loan fund program as outlined by EPA. The second amendment, page 5, line 4, this proposed amendment provides clarity when applicants can expect to receive notice on their status of their application. And then the third and final suggested amendment, page 5, line 5. Many time applicants are funding major capital projects along with other additional funding sources. This final proposed amendment provides the applicant flexibility to align these different funding sources for the completion of a successful project. I appreciate the opportunity to provide these comments, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Appreciate your testimony, and I would urge you to work with Senator Titus on these proposed amendments. Committee, do you have questions of Director Miller? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When you're talking about your amendment, suggested amendment, that grants shall be awarded no later than 180 days of the application, I will look into, what is the process for reissuing those grants, and we might want to say the first round of grants shall be awarded no later than a certain amount. Would you be comfortable with that? So that if money becomes available after those 180 days, it still can be dispersed that.
Yeah,
fiscal year.
I believe we'd be comfortable with that.
Thank you.
Additional questions of Director Miller? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Miller, thank you. As you get ready to, the scoring matrix is kind of hung up. Have you reviewed that? Are you guys happy with that, or would you have any suggestions? That scoring matrix is going to be a big deal. So I just wondered if you had any, as you read this, that might be something to consider too very carefully, just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. We have had the opportunity to review that scoring matrix, and we do believe that with so many different categories, just as was described earlier, that where some may score a little lower in some categories, that they may score higher in others. And so we believe that it's a fair system to be able to kind of level the playing field, that all of these strengths that different applicants have will shine through when all of the criteria are ranked accordingly.
So you're happy with the scoring matrix, basically? You say, this is the first time I've seen it, 0 to 5. There might be some areas of priority, even though they got a 4 in this, that might be more priority to this. I just want to make sure that small town America is getting a good picture of this, of what we're trying to do, so.
I believe that we're comfortable with it because it also aligns, and it, in my mind, seems similar to how some of the federal grant scoring criteria are ranked out, that there's multiple criteria, there's multiple clearly laid out scoring criteria, and that they do encourage you to really focus on the strengths that you have for the criteria that you're going to rank the highest with.
Additional questions, committee? Seeing none, Director Miller, appreciate your
Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony. Committee, we do have a couple neutral testimony. We've got Victoria Asbury with the Kansas Water Office. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning, Chairman Peck and members of the committee. My name is Victoria Asbury with the Kansas Water Office. You do have my testimony in front of you, so I'll keep it short today. I just wanted to take the opportunity to highlight the program as it comes to particularly the demand for the program, and you'll hear it from, I'm sure, other conferees. We've done 2 award cycles so far. I couldn't think of the word award. And on the front page, you'll see for fiscal year 2024, the program did receive 309 applications, totaling $380 million, and the Water Office had $18 million available to award for fiscal year 2024. And on the back of my testimony, you'll see fiscal year 2025. We received 269 applications, totaling $233 million, and the Water Office had $27 million to award. So just so you can see, the demand for this program far outstrips the funding, and we do our best to award, bless you, to award those applications. We have done the application period for fiscal year 2026 funding. That ran from July to September of 2025. We received 281 applications totaling $272 million, and we have $18 million to award. That application review period is currently underway, and we're hoping to make award announcements soon. The House Bill 23-302 grant program, as it's currently known, was proposed and established by the legislature. Senate Bill 317 provides additional direction to the Water Office on how to evaluate and prioritize Water Technical Assistance Fund and Water Projects Fund grant applications. The Water Office appreciates this additional direction and clarity on the legislative priorities associated with the award of these state resources. The funding for House Bill 2302 grant programs is set to sunset in June 2028. You can see by the numbers that the demand for the funding of this program will extend beyond the sunset. And so we're hopeful that these changes proposed by Senate Bill 317 will encourage the continuation of the program beyond the sunset. And I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Have you had, we've got 3 years now running. Are there entities that have applied every year?
Yes, there are. We very often have repeat applicants if they're not awarded in the previous round.
Have you heard from any that just got discouraged and thought, well, we'll never receive funding?
The water office has not heard that. I assume that that happens, but the water office has not heard that specifically. But we have, sorry, I will add, we usually hover around 300 million in applications each year. So I would say that many applicants are continuing to apply.
You have heard previously that there's not likely to be adequate funding because of a certain member on Ways and Means. Committee, do you have questions? Senator Reichman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And again, thank you for your testimony. And I just want to make sure I understand exactly. We're looking at one of these charts again. I like to look at them. And let's just look at 25. You got a total amount awarded is 26.2 million. Then it says not funded 199 and funded is 70, and it goes down below there. So this tells me there's sure a lot of people that like to have these awards. So of the 269, 70 were awarded, and those are the ones that are blue. Now, the other not funded, those are the cities or whatever that applied and did not receive it for whatever reason, okay? And then if I look down there, it says 27 million available to award. What does that exactly mean? That they're still looking at other applications or what they have here and they may award them later, or what does that mean? Thank you.
Sure. So if I understand your question, for fiscal year 2025, the legislature appropriated the water office $27 million to award. In that grant cycle, we actually awarded $26.2 million, and that's just because the next, like say, next in line was more than we had to award that 800,000 or whatever it may be. But we rolled that leftover money into our next grant cycle. So that's available for the fiscal year 2026 grant cycle. So if I understood your question correctly.
Additional questions, committee? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I'm looking at these maps and the dots correctly, many of the awards made in 2025 were for applications not awarded in 2024. So those were repeat applications from those communities.
So the maps are not related to each other, so they're two like separate data sets. So I couldn't say for sure that someone applied in 24 and was awarded in 25, if I'm understanding.
Okay, I'm just looking at where the dots are.
Gotcha. It's very likely. I
can see the pattern that is orange on this side and is blue on this side.
Yeah, it's very likely. I just didn't want to commit.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To go along with Senator Francisco's question, if a application is made in 24, is not awarded, is it considered in 25? Do they have to reapply?
So for the past grant cycles, currently we have asked applicants to reapply because we do make updates to the application every year. Since it's a new program, we didn't get it quite perfect the first time, so we did ask applicants to reapply for the following cycle, yes.
Thank you. Additional questions, committee? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you look at the scoring matrix on the Water Technical Assistance Fund and the Water Project Fund, would there be any need of a different matrix for that kind of thing? And I'm just asking a question there. Or is that the same matrix you'd use for both of them?
So the way I read the bill, and the revisor can certainly correct me, is that the matrix is the same. And from the water office's perspective, we will administer the program however the bill directs us to and however the legislature would like us to.
One quick comment, and I don't know where I put this in at, but we have choices in life, water or roads. That's what I would say, so thank you.
Thank you for for your comment. Seeing no additional questions, appreciate your testimony, appreciate you appearing before us. Our other neutral comment or comment oral presenter is Wendy Stark, Legislative Liaison, League of Kansas Municipalities. Welcome to the committee, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Wendy Stark, Legislative Liaison with the League of Kansas Municipalities, and our organization represents over 550 of the 625 cities in Kansas, and I believe 30-plus counties. And so one of the things that we want to talk about is we do support the overarching purpose and intent of this bill. There were some areas that we did have some concerns, and I did want to bring to your attention on the category specifically related to responsible management of existing resources. By law, cities are required by the Kansas budget law to have a balanced budget, and by the cash basis law to only encumber those funds that cities do not have on hand. If a city is abiding by those laws, we would maintain that cities are managing resources responsibly. Another one of the categories that we're looking at was Category C. And really, we want an even playing field for all of our cities. And we do think that we do have a concern that cities that have access to, that some cities may have, with a growing population, may have more capacity to pay than those with stagnant populations. And so our concern is that all of our cities have access to quality and clean drinking water. And I will state that we every year get together and put together a statement of municipal policy. We get together with members across the state, and one of our 11 priorities is access to clean and safe drinking water and wastewater. Actually, as I've been sitting here, I do have a question. Will each of these categories be ranked the same way? So if there's 8 categories, or will there be any that are prioritized? That was not something that I thought of as I was reading through, but as the discussion happened here this morning, I did start thinking about that. But I will close with the league does support the overall intent, and there were just some areas that we wanted to bring to your attention. With that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Questions, committee? Seeing none, appreciate you appearing before the committee and providing your testimony. You do also, committee, have written neutral testimony from Kate Gleason, Deputy Secretary of Director of Environment, KDHE. So I would direct your attention to that testimony as well. We have no other conferees that have contacted the chair regarding Senate Bill 317, so we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 317. This is legislation that the chair does plan to work. It won't be quite as simple as the one we're getting ready to work. At least I don't think it will be. But yesterday we heard Senate Bill 364. I thought that since we had just a few minutes, if it takes longer, we'll hold it over till tomorrow, but we shall find out. Senate Bill 364, we just heard yesterday regarding the hunting and fishing licenses for senior citizens at a discounted rate, and then kids' lifetime hunting and fishing licenses. Committee, what are your wishes regarding Senate Bill 364? Are there any amendments? Okay, I'm not seeing any amendments to the legislation. Senator Pauser.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick comment, and I just noted that as we were conducting the hearing, there was a lot of support for this bill. It's a popular bill. I personally support it and will be in favor of SB 364. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Making a motion apparently to pass it favorably.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we pass 364 out of committee as amended. Were there any amendments?
Was amended. Favorably or adversely?
Favorably, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
That's kind of important, Senator, for the process. Is there a second? Seconded by Senator Fagg. Questions on the motion? Senator Francisco.
Would we like this to go on the consent agenda?
The chair would like, however, I don't think it will stay, and so I just think that it will be a bill that will run across the floor, give all of us an opportunity to get up and pontificate ad nauseum on how wonderful the legislation is, and the chair of the Ag Committee. Some caught that, some did not. But I appreciate that comment, and I had thought about that, Senator Francisco, but legislation such as this is hard to keep on the consent calendar. Actually, right now, it's difficult to keep any legislation on the consent calendar. We have a member that likes to pull everything off. But be that as it may. With no additional comments, we will vote on the motion. All in favor of passing Senate Bill 364 out favorably, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Committee, that is the extent of our agenda for the day. Appreciate you being here.